What's up, Trunk Slayers? It's Monday. That means it's time for Spicy Monday. So I've re-recorded this video at least 3 times this morning. I keep feeling like being too mean. It's getting too wordy. But at this point, I'm running out of time to get it posted, and I kind of don't give a shit anymore. So I'm just going to kind of rip that Band-Aid off. There's been a bunch of drama that went on in a particular corner of MSP communities recently. And if you were there and you know what tea I'm talking about, yummy, let's drink tea together. If not, I'm not your tea Sherpa. Go put in the work to find your own drama, you lazy person. But the thing that really kind of just aggravates me about this whole situation, there was a particular individual that was posting frequently in a few communities, just really out of touch lunatic content. And that's aggravating in and of itself, but I don't think that's actually the part that really set me off when I think about it. And there were some people, both regular people like you and me, and also famous influential people in our space, that all kind of responded in ways that I think were just as bad as the original person. And I had recorded a whole separate video about understanding that you are still, even if you think you're important in this space, you are still a small fish in a very small pond, and you have no fucking concept of how big the ocean is in the IT space. But I don't think that video was very productive, because I don't think those people are going to listen to me anyways. So, told you all the things that we're not going to talk about. The thing that I keep coming back to is a mistake that I saw the person who was originally posting this content continue to make, that really tripped up everyone else's ability to even meet them halfway. And that, I think, is a common mistake that a lot of people make. And I think it's a good lesson to learn. And it's a lesson that a lot of people, I think, could learn. And there's really 2 parts to that. The first part is the burden of communicating effectively is on you, the communicator. It is not on your audience. And secondly to that, most of us don't know even close to half of everything, even within this space. And I do think most people, you sit them down, would rationally agree, yeah, I don't know everything. But most people, especially in an online forum, we're really, really, really good at detecting bullshit. And easily debunkable bullshit is probably the dumbest thing to use as a communication strategy when you feel like your point isn't being heard. And I saw all parties falling victim to both of these things, to forgetting that communication is the burden of the communicator, not the audience. And don't use easily debunkable bullshit in your arguments, because it immediately makes any of us that were engaged not take anything else you're saying seriously. So I want to talk about both of those for a minute, give some ideas on what maybe, if you are one of those people, you could do to improve, and see where this Spicy Monday takes us. So there's a meme that's starting to float around right now that I would say is not quite hit mainstream, but the meme was inspired from a video that was recorded by an on-the-street style reporter interviewing a young lady, probably out in like a bar or club scene. And that young lady said something that is kind of NSFW, but you probably know what I mean. And if you don't, this is a great example of my first point. So I just gave an example of a piece of information that I think is common knowledge, because most of the people that I talk to on a daily basis are already aware of this meme. But if you're sitting here and you're like, what meme are you talking about, Dean? Then clearly you haven't been exposed to it yet, which means you're not in the audience sample population of people that I can effectively communicate this concept to. And the thing is, the burden of knowing what the source meme is, and therefore what I'm talking about, isn't on you. It's actually on me, the person bringing it up. I know that a lot of us would love to think that our audience members are going to know everything that we know with the same context we know it, and or that they're going to put in the work to look stuff up. And don't get me wrong, educating yourself, learning context, understanding what's going on in the room. You're not in school anymore, anybody. So yes, I think sort of as a thought experiment, sure, if you're in an audience and everyone else is nodding along and you have no idea why they're nodding along, you should probably Google what room you're in and what you're there for. I'm not going to put all of that on the guy on stage, but in sort of the more common and normal practice of we're in a small group, it's important that the communicator understands the audience they're speaking to, that audience's level of engagement, that audience's general level of subject matter familiarity, and tailors their message to that audience. And if you cannot do that as a speaker, you're not truly an expert, and therefore it's not really everyone else's fault for not understanding you. And I just think that's a really, really important thing that everybody that was involved in this drama needs to remember. The burden of communication is on the communicator, not the audience. We are not dumb and wrong for not understanding what you are talking about. Technically, you are dumb and wrong for coming in and trying to teach calculus to a kindergarten class. I'm not saying that's what happened here, but it was more like somebody tried to teach space math that they made up to a kindergarten class, but that's okay. Second point, and I think the part that really kind of aggravates me. So there's a need, based on what I was saying before, and given the internet and not everybody necessarily knows everybody, there is a certain need to establish your CV, your credentials, your resume when you start a conversation, especially where you don't know everybody in the audience and they may not know you. And we know this, right? Because if you've ever gone to like a literal talk, what's one of the first slides is a quick bio about the speaker. Here's who I am, blah, 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 blah. There's two problems. So in that example of going to a talk, everybody has volunteered to go to the talk. So for whatever reason, these people have been placed in a room with a speaker on stage. So the implication is you are there to present and they are there to listen. So the context slide on who you are is really a courtesy to the room first and a lubricant to your point second. Well, on the internet, especially in asynchronous chat forums, Discord, Slack, LinkedIn, whatever, bulletin boards, no, you're not the featured speaker that everybody walked into the room to sit and talk or were tricked into with a weekend in Cabo if they listen to you pitch your bullshit. They're just other people that all are in that room because they all want to share it. It's a common room in the MSP dorm room that everybody's trying to use. And so the argument that I'm trying to present something and everybody needs to quickly and easily understand who I am, why I'm credible to speak on these things, and why they should listen to me, it doesn't hold the same weight anymore. It's no longer a courtesy to the room. It is only a lubricant to the point you're trying to make. So that's important. It's not a courtesy to the room. It's a courtesy to you, the speaker, to make your life easier if everybody understands who you are and why you're saying what you're saying and sort of what your resume is. And I say that not because I think there's anything wrong with establishing your credibility to speak on a topic, even if it's you have to do something you have to do repeatedly, although that should be indicative that nobody knows who you are. It's just more that I think it's folks who are already struggling to communicate. They're already struggling with the idea that the burden of communication on the communicator don't fundamentally understand that going in and establishing your credentials to speak on the subject in those asynchronous forums is only something that helps you. It's not there to help the audience. And once you're aware of that, I think that's a really helpful litmus test for what you should say to try to establish your credibility. And the thing is, this is the internet. And yeah, when you're on stage, I might think that you're full of shit or shouldn't be on stage, but I'm probably not sitting there Googling in the room everything you've claimed to verify if it's true or not, because I'm assuming at least some of that was vetted before they put you on stage, or you wouldn't be on stage. You don't got that luxury on the internet, my friends. So when you say things on the internet, especially when you make bombastic claims to try and back up that you are knowledgeable or important and therefore should be listened to, specifically in the context where everybody is already not listening to you, you got to be careful with how much it is easily debunkable bullshit. Because I will tell you, a lot of the time it is. Things that are useful to us in that context, it varies audience to audience, but generally, like, tangible, hard to find things, whether or not they're true or provable, you know, for example, for me, for the people I talk to, how much revenue and how many employees your MSP has. That's I know you're probably rounding, but that's a tangible thing that helps me right away get a good sense of where you're coming from. Taking it a bit further and you telling me what your gross margin is right away allows me to know how well you understand your own business and how full of shit you are. Those are helpful to me. They probably wouldn't be helpful to a different audience that isn't thinking like me. And therein lies the problem with trying to establish your credibility. And so I think what ends up happening is folks who are already struggling in the situation, they are already not treading water in the conversation they're trying to win, will start trying to mention everyone they know. And I find this to be hilarious and sad and aggravating, which is where this is all driving towards. I don't think you should do that when you're online. And it's not because I don't think that you, well, it partially is because I don't think you don't know some of the people, but I don't think it's a good strategy because it's so freaking easy to debunk, and it's going to always go against you, especially in these situations. What do I mean by that? So if you do sort of the old fashioned, like, I do have a girlfriend, she just goes to another school in another state lie, it's not that that can't be disproved. It probably can be. It's just the amount of effort it takes to disprove it isn't worth it to most of us, especially in that asynchronous chat situation. What is the bigger problem is when you start talking about people that you know as though the transitive property of you knowing them should somehow add weight and credibility to you. And I get where this comes from. Every little kid has had a desire to feel like they're part of some sort of secret group or Illuminati. And then as an adult, we don't really ever lose that. I think everybody kind of secretly wishes they were in some sort of group that had back channel influence to do good or bad thing, whatever. So I'm not disputing that there's that innate desire there. The thing is that if everybody's in that back channel group, it's not a back channel group. And in most cases, because even though this industry is quite large, and I'll talk more about that later, the people who talk to each other and participate is actually rather small. So there's a pretty reasonable chance that everybody you think you know that you think makes you special, everyone else already knows and probably talks to just as much or more than you. And so I just think that's a really important thing to be careful of, that, like, having to say that you're friends with somebody publicly generally tells the rest of us that you're probably not friends with them publicly. And let me explain why. So this whole thing started off with having some awareness of the community you're in and how to communicate to your audience. And so think about that for a second. If you are normally a member of that audience in these asynchronous chat forums, then it stands to reason that others in this audience have seen you interact with other people before. So it's kind of easy to tell if you know the people you claim you know, because I would have seen you interacting with them. And think about that reasonably. If I were to make a statement and say that Kelvin Teggles of 𝒃𝒖𝒓𝒅𝒆𝒏 is my friend and I hang out with him, and then you were to go to a show and see me hanging out with him, then, well, there you go. I don't need to say that he's my friend because you've seen me do it. And if you see me do it a lot, which his actual friends do, then you know that I'm just astroturfing and that I probably am more of a digital friend to him versus a real friend to him, because I don't see him at every show because I don't go to as many shows as he does. And I don't always hang out with him because I wouldn't get in the fucking pool at MSP GeekCon because I'm fat and I didn't want to be shirtless in front of my peers and be judged. my point to all of this is, if you are actually friendly or have a relationship with these people, you will logically interact with them in a public forum frequently. And we will see that. And then we will know that you know these people. If you have to tell us that you know these people, that means that you're not publicly interacting with them in a way that everyone knows. And that's why it's easily debunkable bullshit. And never mind the fact that a lot of times you can just text these people and ask them if they know the other person that claims to know them, and they'll say, I've never heard of them before. Why put yourself in that position at all, when instead you could be putting the work in to actually interact with these people in a public forum and just naturally build that credibility. So I will round this out by reminding everybody, the MSP industry as an industry is very small. It's very small. It is a drop in the bucket. This entire industry could get hit by an asteroid tomorrow and the total world economy wouldn't even sneeze. That's important to remember. I know we think we're important. Globally, we're not that important. And then even within our industry, it's a pretty big industry. It's important to remember that the part of our industry that actually participates in all of these groups is a very, very, very narrow subset of that industry. If you want to think of the MSP industry, I make a bad analogy because I just say we're not that important. But if you want to think of the MSP industry in totality as being all of the water on Earth's surface, then the part of our industry that like actually shows up and like talks and participates in events and everything is like Lake Huron. Like, it's a big lake. It's big, but that's just a tiny fraction of all of the water on Earth's surface. And so now that we've reset this to being within a relatively large lake, it is entirely reasonable that many people in that lake know other people in that lake. And you might be in a small inlet or eddy or pond offshoot of that lake and realize or not realize it. But the whole point of all of this is just all the shit fuckery that I see online. Y'all need to dial that back a notch. If you're not willing to stand behind your nonsense and kind of take ownership for who you are online, just remember that you're probably doing more harm than good by speaking up at all. And if you're not able to understand that the burden of communication is on you, not your audience, you're always going to lose every argument that you make, even if you are both technically and literally correct. And that sucks, because there's a lot of smart people out there that have a lot of really smart and interesting creative ways to do things that are different or buck the trend that the industry's taking. And a lot of that knowledge ends up going unheard simply because the people trying to share it don't understand how to talk to their audience. So if that's you, see what you can do about that. Make an effort. Think about some of the stuff we talked about in this video. And maybe realize sometimes that you're not ready to share. Not that the audience isn't ready to hear you. That's the wrong attitude. It's not that the audience isn't ready for you. You need to go find a better audience. It's you. You need to get better at communicating. But you can fix that. You may never get perfect at it, but you can fix it. Start working on that. Because I have a feeling once you figure it out, you probably are going to share something that we're all going to appreciate you actually shared. Have a great Monday, everybody.